What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back again with another Pound for Pound ATL. Joined as always by my main man, Jonathan Holder. Jonathan, what's going on, brother?
Beautiful day. Uh, you know, looking forward to talking about some Falcons football.
That's it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, as in clarity, as we're not, or transparency, what have you, we're recording this on a Saturday. This will be played on in lieu of our live stream on Tuesday, but we'll be back live Friday, 7 p.m. Just want to go ahead and throw that out there. Make sure that y'all know and understand that we will be back live on Friday. So hopefully y'all will join us 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Friday evening.
Yep.
All right. So with that, a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, we have decided to start off a series, and it's like kind of we're going to take a trip, I guess you could say.
Yep.
We are going to jump on the USS ATL, and we're going to, with the ultimate destination of being, I think it's Las Vegas is where the Super Bowl is, right?
I think
I
so this
think
year.
that's what it is. But anyway, so the ultimate destination being the Super Bowl, right?
Yep.
And we have to figure out who we have to get through, who's going to be the biggest obstacles in our way to achieve the goal of getting to the Super Bowl. And first and foremost, the biggest goal, the biggest obstacle, or the biggest objects in the way right now is the NFC South, right?
Yep.
Once we get, if we can, dominate, conquer the NFC South, then that's one step closer to getting to the achieved destination, being the Super Bowl. So we figured we would take a look at the NFC South and size up the competition that we are dealing with.
Yeah. We got like the primary goal this season. Obviously, just winning season, try to get into the playoffs. But a division win would be a really good, uh, even if that's as far as we get.
Right.
If we were to win the division, get into the playoffs, maybe we're one and done in the playoffs. I wouldn't enjoy that. But if we win the division this year and make it to the playoffs on that, then I think that's a successful season, no matter what ends up happening after that.
Yes.
But
To
winning
do
winning
that,
your division, yeah, to
right.
winning your division, means that it's easier to win your division if you can beat your division foes.
That's it. And so that's what we are going to do today is kind of take a look at the state of the NFC South. Take a look at the other three teams, and kind of gauge what we think is going to be the toughest task, easiest task kind of deal, and just kind of go with it from there. So we're going to start with easiest to toughest, right? And so, uh, starting that off is right now what I would imagine being the easiest task in general, would should be the Carolina Panthers. Um, and I only say that because you have brought in a new head coach who's
Mhm.
installing a whole new scheme that's both offensive and defensive. So it's not like we're installing a new defensive
Defense.
voice, but you still have the same overall vision, the same overall voice, you know, at training camp and all that jazz. Here, you're installing a whole new vision and a whole new, um, direction for the team. So, with the Carolina Panthers, before we get into like what they did in the draft, their free agents, they brought in former Saint and Bengal Von Bell,
Yep.
uh, wide receiver DJ Chark. They brought in elder statesman Adam Thielen
Yep.
to be another wide receiver to go along with DJ Moore. Is it no? DJ Moore got traded, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. That's how
Yeah.
they got the
Okay.
first round. That's how they got the number one overall.
That's right. They traded DJ Moore, which is like that was a kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Running back wise, they brought in Miles Sanders.
And I'll say of the free agent picks, Miles Sanders to me right now is probably the most impactful guy they probably picked up in free agency.
Yeah,
Um,
between him and Shy Tuttle,
yep,
because you're putting Shy Tuttle. That now they have already got a good defense.
yep.
Now I'm not gonna lie to anybody. I haven't like looked into exactly how their defensive coordinator pieces translate. I'm just gonna like operate under the assumption that whoever the defensive coordinator is going to try to put the players in the best position to
Well,
succeed.
yeah, I mean, you still got Derek Brown, you still got Brian
Uh-huh.
Burns, you still got like there's some legit talent on that defensive line, and so unless you royally screw up somewhere along the way, my thought would be this is at worst a like top 15, maybe closer to 15. Like that would be my guess. Now, granted, as we're gonna talk about here in a minute, their secondary, has got some questions.
Right,
So you may have a really good defensive line, and that's so from a pass rushing, uh, from like a pass defense situation, that could maybe drop them a little bit farther down. But I feel like their defensive line is the strength of that team right now, and if
right.
that defensive line can continue to get better, I think that's going to be a problem.
Now they like you bring up the secondary like they got J.C. Horn, but he's his so far in his career he's had to battle injuries, and it even sounds like he or early in OTAs or whatever he might have been dealing with a tweaked hamstring. I think is what it was.
Yep.
So that's something that they're going to hopefully for Carolina Panthers fans, the Carolina organization, they hope that he can start to put that kind of stuff behind him because he was a very promising uh, cornerback coming out of college. Now
Yeah.
looking,
The problem that I run into now, granted, this is OTAs. He's got a whole nother month before they get into training camp, so we'll see. I'm sure he's going to be doing a lot of treatment and stuff like that. The biggest problem, it's maybe not as big right this second, but if that lingers into training camp, once training camp starts in late July, like you're pretty much like full go up until the season. And too many times in the past when I have been watching, whether it's Falcons, specifically Falcons, but like if a guy that we're hoping is going to be a big, a wide receiver, especially, if they are nursing a hamstring in training camp,
yeah,
that tends to just
I actually,
it keeps coming up all season long.
right as you were talking, I was like, all right, I want to double check, like before I just, especially in something I'm not 100% sure about. And as of June 8th, so the beginning of this month, like as they were wrapping up OTAs, this is from CBS Sports. It says Panthers J.C. Horn out indefinitely with an ankle foot injury suffered in private workout. So that doesn't
Mm,
sound good at all. That sounds like
no.
it's um, far worse. The team announced they announced that on Thursday. Um, it says Horn is expected to be ready for the start of training camp in July, but he'll require a walking boot in the meantime. So it's gonna for the Panthers. They got to hope that he bounces back because as of right now, in his first two seasons, he's missed 18 games. So in two seasons, he's played less or right at one, basically,
Yeah.
or close to one. So for
Well,
them,
the hope then would probably be that this is maybe a it could be anything from like plantar fasciitis. It could
mhm,
be the worst kind of the worst case scenario here is Liz Frank. But if it was Liz Frank, I think he'd probably already be kind of done for the year. But
yeah, they would have
they're
announced
probably
that
trying to
by
see if
now.
maybe they can. Yeah, they probably would like to see like where he's at come training camp. But we'll see.
Yep, yep. And so, like obviously their biggest offseason acquisition was Bryce Young. They traded up to the number one spot to then draft Bryce Young. Good lord.
Yep.
Um, but they have Andy Dalton just in case Young's not ready at the beginning of the season. You have that
Mhm.
stalwart veteran. Their other offseason moves, they did grab uh, a couple of our favored players throughout the draft season, and that was safety Jamie Robinson out of uh, Florida. State and wide receiver Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss.
Yep.
So with trading away DJ Moore, they realized that they had to replace that young talent. Yes, they brought in Thielen and Chark, but those guys are on the end of like tail end of their career as
Well, yeah,
far as production and stuff goes.
especially Thielen, but both of those guys in recent years have struggled with injuries. So
Right.
that's that's another. We'll see how things progress.
Hmm.
But I mean, if Chark and Thielen can stay healthy, and you can bring in Mingo, and he can come along nicely, but that's a nice little group that they've got. Um, so it just all we'll see how it goes.
Right. And so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how their secondary looks and um how quickly Bryce Young gets his feet under him and gets their offense moving in the right direction for them. But I see that them having the steepest hill to climb in their road to NFC South supremacy. Um, so
I think
that's why I figured we talk
it's
about
that.
them.
I think it's them and the Bucks,
Right.
which
And we're
is
about to get into
next
the
on our
Bucks.
list.
Yeah, we're about to get into the Bucks. So let's go ahead and move on over.
Well, so before we do that,
Yeah.
we were talking about J.C. Horn. He's been battling some injuries. Obviously, he's battling injury now.
Right.
Um, the other guys I've got there, like Dante Jackson, he only had one incompletion in 9 games last season, or forced just one incompletion before suffering a torn Achilles in Week 10. So, and then you have C.J. Henderson, another guy out there that he allowed like over 100 passer rating on like 70 plus throws into coverage. Um, you know, and then they have Keith Taylor,
Mhm.
who again kind of 52.1 grade in 2022. So and just forced just 3 incompletions. So
Right.
like outside of J.C. Horn healthy, the other guys are not like super inspiring in that
Right.
realm.
Right.
Um, and then they also have Terrence Marshall in the wide receiver group that he so far has not really panned out for him. So does this is kind of probably his make or break season to stay with that team, potentially even he may need to like really show out this training camp just to make it to the opening day roster potentially. So
And then like they're like I said, they're going to be installing that Fangio style system with I just had to double check they have Evero as their DC who did a really good job out there in Denver as the DC, but you had some like Patrick Surtain and I'm blanking on the other corner's name. Uh and like they and Simmons, like Justin Simmons, the safety, like they've got some really good secondary pieces over there. So
yep.
if Horn's out dealing with the secondary pieces that they have, I wonder just how good and intricate that their coverage is going to be,
that
at
well
least this
that
first
that
year.
Yeah, that puts a lot of if that coverage can't hold up, that puts a lot of pressure on the defensive line
Yep.
to win and win early.
As we
Um,
know oh so well here in Atlanta,
yes. Oh
with
yes, yes.
like I ain't even sitting there trying to act like we ain't been dealing with that for about 6 years
Nope.
now.
Yeah, it's been a rough stretch.
So moving on further south, down into the Tampa area, we take a look at the much maligned Bucks. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of aspects that like make me feel like they're in a almost could be considered a worse situation. The reason why I put the reason why we put the Panthers at the bottom, so to speak, is because there's just so much new there. But I think they this year have a tough hill to climb, but I think they have one of the to me what could be the faster trajectories up depending on how well they start gelling and moving. The
Mhm.
Bucks on the other hand are not in a great situation. They are I don't know exactly what their cap situation is, but I feel like it was not a very good cap situation.
No.
And right now you don't have a legit franchise quarterback because you can say, oh, well, JR, neither does Atlanta. We don't know that yet, but we know what Baker Mayfield is at this point.
Yes.
Like, if he was worth keeping, he'd still be in Cleveland. If he was worth keeping, he'd still be in Carolina. He'd still be in LA. You see what I'm
Yep.
saying? The fact that he's on his fourth team in as many years, like, really tells you that, okay, he's just a stopgap. So you have, Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask, battling for the starting QB spot.
Yep.
That doesn't fill you
Which
with a ton of confidence.
which was like crazy because if you look back to the final game of the season last year, um, you know, the game against the Falcons didn't mean other than pride in wanting to beat the Falcons.
Yeah.
Okay, and I get that, totally get it. I'm not saying like, hey, let's go. It doesn't. We're not going to care about this game whether we win or lose, whatever. I'm not saying they need to have that mentality, but like that would have been a perfect game to be like, let's see what Kyle Trask can do, and we
Yeah.
really didn't get that.
No.
So I have no idea what Kyle Trask is capable of. I don't think to prove us wrong. I don't think he's the guy. On the older, and again, just like what you said a minute ago, it's like, well, but we don't know if Ritter's the guy. We've seen enough. I've seen enough from Ritter to at least say like, I'm willing to give him a shot.
Right. You saw
You
the
know,
4 games, you saw, like, consistent progression
yeah,
inside that 4-game block, and so, like you said, willing to give him a shot, and, I've been saying now for a while that he's the guy for 2023, and we'll talk
yeah,
at the end of 2023 whether he needs to be the guy going forward or not.
yep,
But you don't even have, like, to me, you don't even have that talking point with Kyle Trask, and like I said before, you already know that Baker Mayfield ain't the guy, you know?
yep,
So, but the Bucks were able to retain Jameel Dean,
yep,
their corner, who a lot of people thought was good as gone. But they lost Sean Murphy Bunting, Akeem
yeah,
Hicks, Carl Nassib, and Mike Edwards.
yep,
So those were some, may not have been like the most like biggest pieces, but those were some um, key pieces. Their defense is obviously the best thing they have right at the moment. But the biggest question mark for me outside of their players is their coaching staff. Like, you're bringing in a new OC, uh,
yeah,
like, because you moved on from Byron Leftwich, and like Todd Bowles isn't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily be providing any major confidence. I don't think with the fan base of the Buccaneers. Like, he hasn't shown to be a very like great head coach as of yet. Now, of course, he could turn it around as he's finally able to like put in his staff, so to speak, because you remember he took over as the head coach later in the offseason uh when uh BA
yeah.
Brian
Bruce Arians.
Bruce Arians. I was about to say Brian
Yep.
Arians. I'm like, that's not Brian Arians. When Bruce Arians like stepped away, like,
Yeah,
he did that to supposedly open the window for Todd Bowles to be named the head coach, but that didn't give Todd Bowles the chance to put anybody in place that he wanted.
yeah.
Um, so
Well, and
now,
he was probably also handcuffed somewhat uh, with uh, Tom Brady like wanting to keep this guy, and this offensive coordinator was the offensive coordinator you had when you won the Super Bowl. So it's not like he probably had a lot of latitude to be like, I want to
mhm,
bring in my own OC. It's like, well, this guy just won a Super Bowl a season ago. Why? Well, what are we doing? Um, Now, obviously, after last season, you're like, I
yeah,
mean, you could, and you still had Tom Brady last season. So again, that's another thing. Like, my guess would be Tom Brady liked having him there because they worked well together or something like that. Now Tom Brady's
mhm.
gone. He's gone. They bring in this Dave Canales. I don't know anything about this guy.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know. Like I remember seeing the name, but no, I don't know much about him. I have to admit, so I can't necessarily sit here and speak on what he's done. I don't know if you could like pull up his history to see if anything like
so he spent
stands
a
out.
to- so he spent a total of 13 seasons on Pete Carroll's staff in Seattle, alternately tutoring receivers and quarterbacks, and also serving as the passing game coordinator in 2020 and 2021.
Huh.
So I don't see what
So
he did in
this is like
2022.
for them, this is a uh like a Ryan Nielsen. You know,
Yeah,
never really called plays. Has been position coach kind of deal. Now he gets his chance to put a his stamp on the situation, where he's going to get to coach. You know, they still have Mike Evans and Chris Goodwin, so they still have some, you know, decent receiving talent. They got Russell Gage down there, who's a good third option with, you know, young tight end Cade Otton. So I mean, they've got some like receiving weapons, and I'm pretty sure they're feeling like that if, you know, Mayfield or Trask isn't the guy, kind of like a lot of the similar situation that we're in here in Atlanta, that the team itself might be ready to like drop in
yeah.
a new young QB, whatever veteran QB, depending on who becomes available, can be able to drop one of those guys in and hit the ground running. Um, their best like drafting, you know, best draft person was, did I somehow, oh, there it is. They drafted Kalijah Cansey, the undersized defensive lineman, in the first round.
Okay.
I thought that was kind of rich in the first round, but he's an interesting prospect. He was hard to block down there at the Senior Bowl, so pairing him with Vita Vea in the middle could make for an interesting tandem.
I mean,
They all,
he had like 47 pressures
oh yeah,
in 2022 for Pitt, 8 sacks, 9 hits. I
hmm,
mean, the guy produced. So, like, I remember when he came, I was hoping that this was a guy maybe the Falcons would look at in the second, maybe third round,
right, and
uh, and see him going first round at 19. I was like, what?
right, right. That was one of the ones that kind of shocked us. But they got everybody's darling favorite toothless wonder Cody Maul out of North Dakota State. Going to put him right next to Ryan Jensen on the line, where they're going to look like twins. Um,
Yep.
Yaya Dobby. It was an
That was a
interesting,
guy I honestly thought we were going to look at him.
right.
You know, late day two, maybe day three, if he made it
Hmm.
that far. But so, like, I want to say right around when he was picked, I was wanting, I think they went like a little bit before us in
Hmm.
that particular round. And I was like, this is the guy that I want. I'm hoping he makes it. And then they picked him. I was like, God bless it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, their biggest deal is like, what do they do? What are they doing at quarterback, and how does this new OC translate? So I
Yep.
think like Todd Bowles has questions about, is he a competent, you know, head coach, as far as like in game management, things like that. So um and you know, they have, you know, salary cap, you know, potential situations, you know, coming up in the future. So like I said, they're a team that has a lot of you know, still has a lot remaining to answer. So
Well,
but
so for them,
mhm,
their biggest like their biggest problem, defense, I think is probably going to be okay.
right.
For the most part. I mean, you still got Jamel Dean, you still got Delonte David, you still got some guys on that defensive line. You brought in some young talent there as well. So I'm not necessarily like like I am still worried about their defense, right? The offense has some really good skill players. Their biggest problem, though, potentially, is going to be their offensive line.
Yeah.
Like they're taking Tristan Wirfs, moving him from right tackle to left tackle. Um, basically, so with that move, that pencils in their second round pick from last year, Luke Gedeke at right tackle. He only played, it says here, 55 of his 642 snaps at right tackle last season. And again, depending on what weight you put on the PFF grade, he finished his rookie season with a 46.7 PFF grade. So he struggled pretty good, and they don't really have a lot. they don't have a lot of like not even just depth. They just don't have a lot of experience behind
Right. Yep.
it. It's one thing if you got a guy that maybe he's not necessarily like the best guy, but he's been a guy that's been in the league for like 4 or 5 years, so at least he knows what it takes to be an offensive lineman in the NFL. He knows what it takes to prepare so that if he's needed, he can step right in. You feel okay about him at least not completely being a total liability.
Right.
Um, so they don't really have that. So yeah, we'll see. Like I would love the Cody Maw pick. I thought that's who we were going to go after, or who I wanted us to go after. But I will say, totally good with Bergeron. That was just not a name that I had been looking at for us in the second round. If we went offensive line in the second round,
Right.
that was a guy. I just hadn't even looked at him. It was Cody Maul for me was kind of the guy I really wanted.
Yeah, you kind of we kind of got stuck on Maul. But that
Yep.
happens. You always get those draft darlings.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, like it's like their biggest, depending on what happens with the quarterback position, and like reports coming out of Tampa Bay is it hasn't looked good as of yet. But we haven't hit training camp. Still,
Yep.
plenty of time for them to right that ship. So
Yep.
now on to the what I feel like is going to be what I feel like is going to be the toughest task. And the reason why I say that is yes, they lost, you know, a good bit off of that defense.
Hmm.
Um, they lost Marcus Davenport. Obviously, we're well aware that they lost David Onyemata and Caden Ellis. They also lost, Shy Tuttle and Andy Dalton. Like Andy Dalton, I don't think is that big of a deal.
No.
Um, but you bring in Derek Carr, you bring back Michael Thomas, you bring in Jamal Williams. There's some up and down about what might happen with Alvin Kamara, um, because you're kind of getting a little bit of a redundant nature with what Jamal
Well,
Williams is good at and
I
Kamara
mean,
is good at.
he's still got the whole or did that get dropped at some
I
point?
don't
The
know. There's
assault
some.
thing.
I think there still might be hanging over his head on that one. I'm not 100% sure. Um, let's see. I'm trying to think. Uh, so yeah. Now, free agent signing wise, outside of like Jamal Williams, they didn't really like make any like major moves. Calling Kalen Sanders and Nate Shepard to replace David Onyemata and Shy Tuttle. I don't think that those guys are on the same level there, but they did in their first round uh, sign Brian or draft Brian Breesy, who
Yep.
I think has a real chance of being a solid player. Then followed it up with Isaiah Foskey, who was one of my favorite, uh, day two defensive linemen or edge rushers rather. Like he should come in and give them some very versatile play, like being able to
Yep.
drop into coverage, rush the passer. And then they followed that up with Kendry Miller out of TCU. If we didn't go, Bijan Robinson in the first round, Kendry Miller was one of those guys that I was eyeing in a later round.
Yeah.
So,
I liked
um,
a lot of what I saw from him on tape, and
right.
he's kind of like Alvin Kamara light.
Hmm.
He's not as quite as big, but he's got that same escapability and the agility and all that and the speed. Like he's got that in spades. So
Right.
uh, yeah, he's that's a potential worrying pickup.
Now the real question is going to be like, does Derek Carr hit the ground running, and what version of Derek Carr do you get? This is the 10-year vet who has had an up and down career. Um, the fact that the Raiders were willing to move on for him, whatever you might think of Josh McDaniels, or even Mark Davis, or I think it's Mark Davis is the owner, Al Davis's son.
Yeah.
Like you don't move off of franchise quarterbacks. Very rarely does that happen. Um, so I don't know what kind of. life or what kind of like spark Derek Carr, actually gives you, because there wasn't much of one for them the last few years out there in Las Vegas. And he's coming into a situation where you have a beat up, Michael Thomas, who we make jokes all the time about how slow he is, and he can only catch a slant. But they add A.T. Perry in the draft,
Yeah.
and Jarvis Landry. So I mean, that's a decent, or
Well, they
could
had
be.
they had Jarvis Landry already. I think they just re-signed him.
That maybe that's what it was. Maybe they just re-signed him. Um, so you brought over a Foster Moreau, who I think played for, like played with Derek Carr and the Raiders, if I'm not
I think so.
mistaken.
I think so.
Trying to see if I can uh, figure out where he was. Okay. No, they're not giving me the information that I'm looking for quickly enough. So the question for the Saints is on that defensive, without Ryan Nielsen, without Shy Tuttle, without David Onyemata, without Caden Ellis, without Marcus Davenport, like how quickly does that front seven get back to being the strong suit? You know,
Yeah.
because yes, you still have like Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May in your safety spot, but like uh your corners aren't necessarily like you got Grabamore. I mean, excuse me, Lattimore, who
Yeah.
you got Lattimore, who's a good corner. I'm not going to sit here and try to say that he's not, um, but he doesn't like strike fear in the hearts of being like a shutdown corner. He's a good, solid, consistent corner. So you got.
He is a guy. He's very aggressive.
Mhm.
Okay. Personally, okay, I'm not saying he's not a bad corner in the slightest. He is a very good corner, but I think he has benefited from having the defensive line that they've had, where he can be that super aggressive, knock guys off the line of scrimmage, and just be handsy with them all the way down the field. And he doesn't have to. He hasn't really had to do that where he's had to do it for more than 3 to 3.5 seconds. You
Right.
know, once now potentially we'll see how it goes, but potentially we're looking at a defensive line that may not be as good as it was last year or even a couple of years ago. And if they kind of the same thing with the Panthers, like if that defensive line is not giving you the pressure that you're looking for and you're forcing your back end to have to cover longer, can Lattimore hold up under that?
Right.
Can without being super grabby to the point where now he's going to start getting the flags.
Yep.
Whereas before, they were having to get rid of the ball quicker. It just he didn't have to work as much. If he's got to work more now, does that trigger more flags? Because now we're talking handsy way down the field.
Yeah, because the deal is like you got a battle like the battle for cornerback two uh,
Yeah,
is is one that Saints fans need to be watching, which is Adobo versus Alante Taylor. Now, Paulson Adobo, according to PFF, allowed 69% completion rating on his throws, like that
yeah,
were thrown at his way, with 8 forced incompletions and no interceptions. Now Taylor had a little bit better numbers in his rookie season with 45% pass completion, and 12 forced incompletions. So, like, that's a battle that they're hoping somebody's going to walk away with,
yeah,
and in camp, because that's one of their biggest question marks. But like this last little statement on this Outlook article here says it all to me. Like this sums up the Saints is like if Carr cannot take advantage of his playmakers and consistently make explosive plays, this could be a long season for the Saints. Coming off of like the 2022 season where his play fully
regressed.
obviously started to regress, you know, does Mike Lombardi, like, can they get that Drew Brees like short play, intermediate type throws, catch and run type situations, like what ends up happening with Kamara, what ends up happening, like does Jamal Williams really get go? Like we could do this like even for our team, and we've done it so far over the offseason,
Yeah,
talking about ours. But every team in the NFC South has question marks that they are going to have to answer. But I
yeah,
think come the end of the season, it's going to come down to the Falcons and the Saints, in my opinion, to who ends up taking the NFC South crown. And I think this year, the Falcons, if they gel quickly enough, that they have a higher trajectory
yes,
with the guys like Pitts and London and Cordell and Bijan. Like yes, they're not traditional playmakers, but they're still a plethora of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. It's just can Ritter take that step and keep improving?
yeah.
That's going to be the
Right,
biggest question, right?
right. And I think when I look at this division from an offensive standpoint, I think the two teams that potentially have the ability to do really well offensively, are going to be the Saints and the because I think the Saints and the Falcons probably have the two best offensive lines.
I think so.
Uh, you know, Carolina, we'll see. But like, I feel really good with what the Falcons are doing, offensive line wise. Uh, I will leave if Hennessy starts day one over Bergeron. I'm going to trust that he's starting day one over Bergeron because he showed better than Bergeron.
Right.
If Bergeron, I think if Bergeron is neck and neck with Hennessy, then you
They may
start
just take their
Bergeron.
yeah, they may just take their lumps,
Yeah,
potentially, especially if he's getting more push. You know what I'm saying? If
yeah,
he's able to get more push and open up bigger holes in the run game, but it may not give you as much in the passing game, I think that they would probably live with that with the mentality that Arthur Smith has shown of wanting to run the ball. So I could easily see them choosing um, Bergeron if he's opening up, bigger holes more consistently, or even on the other side of it, if he's showing that he has a stronger anchor. So
yeah.
we'll see how that stuff goes. But I
Now,
think
now back. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna kind of like bring it back around to uh, what I see as being our biggest obstacle in the NFC South. I think is the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, the one other thing with regards to the Saints or the Aints, we will that is how we will refer to them now on. They are the Aints. They will never be anything else. But the like one of the other like kind of team needs is probably linebacker depth. Like I remember when we got Caden Ellis, all we heard out of on Twitter from like Saints fans or the Aints fans is the paper bag brigade was like, oh, you guys got our backup.
Right,
Like this is a guy who But again, if you look at the second half of last season, he was a starter. He took starter reps. He was a big part of that defense, and
right,
he he produced a ton in that second half of that season. And but now you look at it and you have Demario Davis. He's 34 years old.
right,
You start to get to that point of that of his career where he's gonna that decline. My guess, he could Tom Brady it and play really well for another 5 years. I don't think that's going to happen. I just due to the nature of that particular position, you don't have the protections you do as a quarterback. He's constantly banging his body around. So I would say you talk about another season two,
yeah,
probably tops, playing at a similar, maybe slightly less where he's at now would be a good thing. But so you have Davis, and then you have Pete Werner, who had a really good rookie season. Um, but then in 2022, he had a larger role, was not able to duplicate that success.
hmm
And especially against the run, he had a grade of like 59. Largely due to like 12 missed tackles that he had over the season. So yeah, and then aside from Werner, they have Zach Baun,
Right.
who's next up on the depth chart, but he's played fewer than 450 snaps in
I
three
would I
seasons.
would imagine that
So,
Bond, if they decide to like uh keep that Caden Ellis type role that he played for them, that Bond would probably step in to that. But I mean, the reason why Ellis got the snaps that he got last year is because of Werner being hurt. So you know you got to wonder if that's an issue going forward, and also like Cameron Jordan's a year older,
yep,
and now you're going to be relying like heavily, potentially heavily on guys like Brian Breesy and Isaiah Falsky. Can they hit the ground running?
yep,
That's one thing that I have enjoyed at least this year with the Falcons is that like other than Bijan Robinson, who you feel pretty good about, like we're not relying on rookies this year. Now we're relying on guys to second year guys to take a step forward,
yep,
such as Troy Anderson and Ebiketie and Malone, but you're not relying on rookies to give you meaningful snaps unless they feel like they've earned it, such as like
yep.
Bergeron. You have a Hennessy that you can plug in until you feel comfortable with Bergeron. So that's it. That's an exciting thing to me, you
Yeah.
know. But
I don't feel, yeah, like it doesn't feel like we're taking ginormous gambles
right.
in a lot of places.
And
You're bringing a lot of vet talent to supplement the second year guys, and that like you said, outside of Bijan Robinson, really nobody else on that we drafted. Do I feel like we, like you said, we don't have to have like this guy has to hit the ground running for us to be successful.
right.
Well, I just don't see it.
Between like, and we're not even, you could say, oh, well, you're taking a gamble on, with Ritter on the most important position. You've watched him for a year. You know what he's about.
Yes.
You know what his mental makeup is. You know what his physical makeup is. You have seen him practice and be around it and be in it for a year. So yes, you may not be dealing with like you may be dealing with a guy who doesn't have a ton of starting experience in the NFL, but you're dealing with a guy who has been in your system now for a year, and that's a plus. Now,
Yeah.
like a lot of these other teams in the NFC South, especially, are dealing with guys that haven't been in their system that they're going to be counting a lot of snaps on, and that can always go south in a heartbeat. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the look at the NFC South, our first major like asteroid
Hurdle.
belt that we have to clear in the
Yeah.
USS ATL before we can get out into the stars to use some sci-fi references here. So
I'm
I
always
think
down for some sci-fi
there you
references.
go. But I think that there's an asteroid belt that we can clear. We can navigate through it to get out into the greater unknown. And the next time we come together to do one of these videos, we're going to take a look at who we feel like are the major obstacles in the NFC at large. So say we do make it through the NFC South, we do come out on top, we do get a playoff berth. Who are the opposition? Who are the forces that uh, we feel like are going to present the biggest problems? And that's what we will take a look at next time we do one of these recordings. So but I appreciate y'all joining us. Like I said before at the top of the show, we'll be live on Friday. So please join
Yep.
us live as we cut up and chat up and come with your questions and come with your comments. And as always, y'all can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Grim1128, GRIMM1128. Jonathan?
At Jonathan M. Holder. Come by, say hi.
That's right. Like I said, just keep your eye on the channel. We'll be live on Friday. And as always, Falcons fans, rise up.
Rise up.